Okay, so we're going to reboot this axle and replace the grease in it. This is for a Subaru BRZ, Scion FRS Toyota 86, probably a bunch of other Subarus too. Going to be using some CV2 redline grease. Have factory boot kits and boot parts here from Subaru. Gonna need a couple tools to do this. Flathead screwdriver, some pliers, and some release split pliers as well. Please note this is gonna make probably a pretty big mess, so be ready for that. I've got a ton of paper towels here, red shop rags, etc. to pick up this mess. So, real quick, first thing I'm going to do is unband this axle. If you're careful, you can actually reuse these bands. I would recommend not reusing them a whole bunch, but once or twice is probably okay. More than that, you might have an issue with some bands, but you can buy new bands from Subaru as well. If you buy their boot kit, it'll come with enough bands to do that, all of it. The first thing you want to do, actually I'll zoom in here. The boot bands, as you can see, are basically folded over on the top of themselves. So you just want to remove those. Those bands by prying up on the edge and releasing them. And obviously be careful so you don't poke holes in the boots if you're going to reuse the boots, but this particular boot is split on this axle, so it doesn't really matter. Got those lifted up, spread them out. See that these have a self-tightening little mechanism on them. They basically fold over on themselves and then latch into that. That's how the band works. If you're going to reuse them, kind of save those. Do not, then it doesn't really matter. Said, this particular axle we're taking apart has about 67,000 miles on it. It's never been repacked before, so it's got the factory lube in it. You guys are going to see how this factory lube holds up under regular use, which isn't very well. I would almost recommend repacking these as a routine maintenance item. So, see, this axle has pretty much the grease all burnt out of it. It's all gone. It's because it liquefied. You just pull this down out of the way. said, that boot has hole in it, but there's not much grease left in there. Alright, so now that we got that open, all that grease that used to be in there is pretty much gone anyway. We're just going to use paper towels to clean it out. And then here comes the first step of taking that joint apart. So I'm going to use a pick. There's a little ring inside here that is holding all the joints together. Basically just pull that out. It's right on the inside of this metal sleeve. Basically just a little spring clip. You want to save that if you're going to reuse it, although the kit does come with a new one if you bought a new one from Subaru. Now this whole boot will pull right apart, and you can see the grease inside has pretty much liquefied and is useless at this point. You'll notice real quick too that the little cage on the balls is tapered. Smaller end goes to the inside, larger end goes to the outside. You want to pay attention to that for reassembly, but it just comes right apart. To get this cage completely apart, there's a snap ring right inside here, so we'll take that out next. Wipe off some grease. Grab your balls as they fall out. Snap ring out. Now that whole cage will slide off. You may need some encouragement. Yep, this will need some encouragement. We're looking for, as far as any wear or problems, I'll wipe this off, and you can see it's got a little bit of wear on the inside. You can see by the shiny marks. That's fine. There's no grooves, no chunks missing, anything like that, so that's not a big deal. Spring clips all the same. And this is the big thing you want to check. Always want to check your balls. Make sure that they have no grooves, they're nice and shiny. No scoring, anything like that on them if you're going to reuse them. Subaru does not sell any of these pieces, the cage, gear, any of that. They don't sell that separately, neither does Toyota. They don't sell the balls separately, so keep track of those. Don't lose your balls. If they are damaged, then you may need to buy a new axle, which they do sell, a complete axle. Most of the time, like I said, you just need to clean all this out and everything is good in it. This boot had a little slit in it. You can kind of actually see where it's shiny right there. And I can almost get my hand through it, but not quite. But there's a little hole right there, so this boot is no good any longer. Alright, so got that one side apart. Now we'll move on to the other side. Pretty much the same process, same style clamps, just gotta pry them apart, get them open up. And fun little note here, to do this one, you have to take the inner apart. This is the outer. We took the inner apart first. So if you have an outer boot blown, prepare to do both of them. If you have just inner boot problems, you can do just the inner. This inner boot, or excuse me, this outer boot actually doesn't have an issue currently, but it does have close to 70,000 miles, about 65 or so thousand miles on it. So we're going to take it apart, just take a look at it as well. See if there's anything interesting going on there, but reboot both sides just for preventive measure. A little bit more grease in that outer. That's why I said most of the time outers don't have the same issue that the inners do. Why that is, not quite sure. Subaru does use the same grease, inner and outer. The inner one just seems to take more abuse, probably from being so close to the exhaust on the driver's side. Not quite sure on the left side why the inner seem to give more trouble. They're also a little less protected, the inner boots, you know, from being hit by stuff. The outer boot's kind of protected by the calipers, the knuckle. So it's a little bit harder for debris to get up in there and strike it, cause a problem with the boot. Like I said, this boot, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not leaking. But while we're here, might as well show you how it works. All right, so gotten the entire joint cleaned out, pulled the boot completely off the shaft. Then basically I use a grease gun and I pump the grease into the holes until it comes out the other side, and just keep doing that over and over until the grease is coming out. Plenty of grease inside there, and now it is ready to put a new boot on it. All right. All right, so we get our outer boot. Subaru does sell separately. Like I said, you can buy this as a kit. Comes with all the clips, all the clamps, the boot, all those things you need. It even comes with grease that Subaru provides. However, I'm not a big fan of the Subaru grease, so I would recommend the better grease, but that's up to you. So the two boot numbers, I don't know if you can read them, it's 134.92 and 135.92 are the two boots. 134 is the outer boot, 135 is the inner boot. So you gotta make sure you put those on correctly. And this is the fun balancing part. On there, and it pops on the grooves, put back in the vise. Pop that over, new boot is on, clean off some excess grease, and then we'll put the clamps on. Reuse this clamp, just going to put it right back on there the way it was. Very simple, these clamps self-tighten, so as you pull it down, it's self-tightening and pivoting on itself. Now the hard part, you got to get either somebody to help you or be very coordinated so you can hold this down and lay the tabs back over on its edge. We'll see how coordinated I am. Like to tap those down, make sure that they're nice and flat. Doesn't need a whole lot of force to do it. And now the clamp is on there, secured as it should be. As I said, you can buy new clamps if you'd like. Subaru sells all the clamps separately, except for this big one. This big one will only come in their kit. The smaller ones you can buy individually. Which I have here. And those part numbers I will put up. Same method, just wrap it around, make sure the boot is where it's supposed to be. Go. Same thing, you just pivot it over on itself, it reaches self-tension, lay it down flat, and then push it down. Clamp arms are where they need to be. On this smaller one, got a set of channel locks. Good little cheat. Hold it down at the right tension. And then fold the tabs over. Helps to have your vise nice and tight. As before, being careful you're not pinching or cutting the boot when you're hammering. Tighten them down with the hammer. And there you go. Got a nice rebooted and clamped axle outer shaft. Little pro tip too, when you're installing these in the car, you notice this shaft, this blind shaft is pretty lubricated. Put some anti-seize on that before you install it. It'll make it, the next time it comes out, a lot easier. If you guys are having trouble getting these out of the hubs, do not hammer on this end. If you're gonna hammer on it, make sure you're using a punch in the hole that's in the center. Otherwise, you need to use a gear puller or axle puller that can hook to your hub and then push in on this to push that through. You don't want to hammer it and mushroom out this tip. Otherwise, you're going to make that a little bit unusable. You don't want to do that and ruin the axle. All right, moving back on to the inner side, the most common side. All right, most important step. When you start this, make sure you're putting your clamps on first. because you don't want to get it all rebooted and all your grease and everything ready to go and then realize that you forgot to put your clamp on there. So here's one of those clamps new. See how they're set up? There's a little tab right there. When you fold this over, it self-tensions. This part lays down here and you just crimp the ends shut. We'll put that on there. We'll grab our new boot, which is a 35 because we're doing the inner. I'm going to use a little bit of this old lubricant to get it on here. Go. Get it out of the way. Said we're going to hit up some of this with a brake clean, especially this. We want to get all that cleaned out of there. All right, got that pretty much cleaned out. Go. See, I've got a little bin there, so I'm going to fix that real quick. Make sure that's nice and straight. Alright, now that that's nice and cleared and clean, I'm going to get the super messy part. Obviously, you want to use the proper amount of grease in here. Subaru says about 6 ounces of grease per cup. So 6 ounces in here, 6 ounces in the outer. This tube comes with 14 ounces. You should be easily able to do a one-hole axle with this. As I said, I use the CB2 in a grease gun. It's easier to put in the outer without taking the entire thing apart. This you've already got it apart, so it doesn't really matter. What I like to do is just take a couple handfuls. Put it down in here. Make sure I coat all the walls on the inside where those balls are going to rub. That could have been a mess. Then I need to start reassembling the cup. Alright, how do you do that? First thing you need to do, put this piece on your shaft. Second thing, you need to look at this and you'll be able to see where the clamp was clamped on it. On the side, you can see the imprint right there at the top. Don't know how hard it is to see on camera, but where that snap clip was. So you know it goes that way because the snap clip goes on the outside. Now that I have grease all over my hands, hammer that on. Alright. Next we need to put the snap ring in. Clean this grease off. Alright, so now we're going to put our new snap ring in. here. Another pro tip, keep your fingers on the snap ring, because if it pops off there, you'll never find it probably. They like to go forever. Once you put it on, make sure that snap ring is engaged in its channel, so this will not come loose. Like this. Alright, now the part you're going to get greasy again. So, to install the balls, you pull this back, and you'll see that it doesn't really like to sit in there the right way. So you'll have to push it past it, rotate it, and pull it forward a little bit, and then you'll see that these balls line up with the chamber. And the easiest way to get those to stick is put a bunch of grease in there. Once that's done, you can start sticking the balls in. Grease will hold it in place. To ensure the grease holds them in place, I like to put a little bit on the outside as well. It doesn't hurt to over lubricate. Alright, now I'm going to clean off my hands again. Alright, now for the final step, this you just slide in there with the little divots that you can see here where the balls ride. Just slide that in, slide it right over. And then, to keep it all together, you got to put that last clip in, and that is that spring-loaded clip. Again, all these clips, in my opinion, you can reuse 1 or 2 times, but Subaru says replace them every time, so use at your own discretion. You just put this in there, a little force, make sure it gets in the groove. Start it at one end, and then hold it with the other finger and walk it around. And once you're sure it's in place, give a tug on this, and it will go to that far, and then it will not come out anymore because the clip is holding it in place. So you've got that where it needs to be, and it's ready to have the boot put on it. Alright, so we just slide this boot up now. Again, get it over the lip. And on. And it's ready to go. Now, here's a little tip that some people say works. I'm not 100% sure if it does or doesn't, but I'm one of those, I'd rather do it and see what happens. See if it helps or not, than not do it, because this is the time to do it. And all those little extra straws that you get from WD-40, brake clean, whatever it may be. Some people mention that putting one of these in here helps vent the hot air out of that boot when it gets hot. So I don't know if that works. But better to be safe than sorry, so I cut myself a little small piece. And before we put this together, we're going to stick this in here. Basically, what it's going to do is act as a vent, so if the air gets hot in there, instead of it expanding the boot, that it will release. So we'll see how that works. That will make closing the clamp a little bit harder. All right, same technique as before. This gets bent over. Back onto itself. And that clamp should be laying down, so this end of it is at the end of the two clips that hold it. This one, of course, is being a little difficult. It's all right. It is under quite a bit of tension, so just be aware of that. Get one of the tabs over, then you can work on the other one. As I've mentioned a couple times, be careful. Don't tear up your new boot by puncturing it with a screwdriver or something else while you're doing this. Alright, that one's done. Now we'll go to this one. To get this one over, because it has the straw here in place now, we are going to put the straw right where the pivot is on it. And that will make it a little bit easier. Lay down nice and flat. There we go. Nice. new banded boot with a straw. That we'll see if that keeps it any cooler or any better on track. And that's it.